So it isn't about who got into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but for the second year in a row, it is about why Terrell Owens didn't get in. Hall of Famer and Selection Committee member Dan Fouts had the following explanation. Dan?
I think his numbers are very worthy, but again, on the other side of it, you know, his actions on and off the field, on the sideline, in the locker room, and the fact that he played for so many teams, it was such a great player. The question to me always comes back to, if he was so great, why would those teams get rid of him? And I think we all know the answers. I think he did receive a fair evaluation of his career, both pros and cons. But obviously, ripping the Hall of Fame in the process, what good is that going to do? I just don't understand that, but I didn't understand a lot of the things he did in his career.
Stephen A., what do you make of Fouts' comments?
I think he should be ashamed of himself. But having said that, let me be very, very careful moving forward by reminding everybody that Dan Fouts is somebody I have profound respect for. What he was as a quarterback, what San Diego through the Air Coryell era was, I greatly respect and appreciated with him, Charlie Joyner, Chuck Muncie, Kellen Winslow Sr., Dan Fouts, and that offense in San Diego was incredibly, incredibly special. And I always regretted the fact that they lost in that AFC Championship game in Cincinnati, because I believe had the game been in San Diego instead of Cincinnati's Kenny Anderson team in an ice bowl, for crying out loud, because that's how cold it was, Max. I truly believe in my heart of hearts that San Diego would have been in that Super Bowl instead of Cincinnati. Having said all of that, Dan Fouts has been around long enough. In 14 years in his NFL career, he went to the playoffs 4 times. Now, he played for San Diego throughout his entire career, but he's seen players come and go from various different teams. He's heard reports about individuals that ultimately ended up in the Hall of Fame that didn't have the greatest reputations. But I assure you that when Dan Fouts was playing, Dan Fouts would have been one of those individuals that emphatically stated, your performance matters. How you perform on the field of play matters. If the Hall of Fame was about being liked, then a lot of dudes would not be in there. And to look at T.O. with 15,934 receiving yards, 153 TDs in 15 NFL seasons, 1,078 receptions, ranking top 6 in a multitude of categories for wide receivers all time. When he was on the field, he was a difference maker. And Dan Fouts, being a quarterback, should know that better than anybody. So to sit up there and to say, it's one thing if he would have said, we didn't like his reputation. That's not good. But we can't deny what he did. But to not say that, or to say that and use that as an excuse to justify omitting somebody whose qualifications are clearly worthy of Hall of Fame induction based on off-the-field behavior, I think Dan Fouts should be ashamed of himself for making that statement. I really do.
Well, first of all, Deion Sanders played for 3 teams. I mean, you go to other sports, but to make it, Carlos Beltran moved around to a lot of teams. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame, and he deserves it. And he was a well-liked teammate.
They won titles,
Deion Sanders moved around. Yeah, okay, Deion Sanders moved around teams. Not T.O.'s fault he didn't win titles. I mean, he was the best player on the field in that Super Bowl, and they were playing the Patriots, and he was the best player on the field, either team that day, on one leg, incidentally, for which he was called selfish leading up to the game that he wanted to play on one leg. T.O.'s got this right. He said, look, I got a slap on the wrist last year because it was my first year of eligibility. Get it. You're not a first ballot Hall of Famer because you were considered a distraction in the locker room. Okay. This isn't first ballot anymore. And for Fouts not only to say on and off the field, on the field he balled. What is Fouts talking about? Off the field, did he get arrested? Did he get improv? Was he in trouble? Did he show up out of shape and unprepared? No. What are you talking about? Because you rubbed some people the wrong way in the locker room? Because you're wondering why everyone can't ball like you? And then for Fouts to say, so he's wrong there, in my opinion. And then for Fouts to say, and then taking shots at the Hall of Fame, you're not doing yourself any favors, essentially. If there's an implicit admission there that by taking a shot at the institution, it's going to encourage the voters to not vote for him, whichever voters feel that way should recuse themselves from the vote. What has that got to do with T.O. the player? I don't understand that at all. So if Fouts is taking the temperature of the room, speaking for himself and maybe for others, at least the way he's interpreting it, that people think that T.O.'s, I don't know, locker room issues with some guys disqualifies him from the Hall of Fame, that is simply wrongheaded, as I've said all along. There are hard decisions for the Hall of Fame. There are borderline cases, guys who shouldn't be in, barely in, etc., maybe eventually. That ain't T.O. This is a no-brainer. It's an easy one. T.O. is a Hall of Famer by the eyeball test, by the numbers, by common sense. He should be in the Hall of Fame, period.
Max, I think we have to go a little bit deeper, though, because when you think about Dan Fouts, you were a quarterback. That means you know what the position requires and you know what other positions require. You also have been in a locker room for 14 years. You were there in San Diego for 14 years. You know what troubles this is. You also saw Ryan Leaf and how detrimental he was to his own growth and maturation when he was the second overall pick behind Peyton Manning, and how disastrous his career and his life turned out before he turned things around. He's getting himself better. We saw him in Super Bowl week last week. We wish him nothing but the best. I'm simply saying that to say you understand all the nuances. And one of the things that T.O. has never been given credit enough for, we saw him on reality TV and other places where his emotions came out, and he was very, very revealing. So we discovered an individual that had problems at home, that was never acknowledged and recognized by his father, that had a lot of demons that he had to overcome because they were inflicted upon him as a child. We live in a society where we find reasons to absolve folks from culpability in terms of their actions because of things that may have affected their life time and time again. We're looking at the NFL now on a macro level from a business perspective, Max, where, okay, you had previous regimes that paid no attention to the concussion issues. So what the NFL is doing right now, they're trying to address it with the level of sensitivity it deserves. So we understand that with all of these other things, but we can't understand that with T.O. when he has the numbers that show that despite what bedeviled him and what plagued him, he was still able to go out there and perform at a Hall of Fame level. And you can't give him that love? I don't understand it. I really don't.
We're